guys, this is part 2 to the episode on strings. If you haven't listened to part 1, I hope you'll go back and listen. In part 1, we discussed the different types of strings. In part 2, we're going to discuss tension and when you should actually have your strings changed. So here it is. What tension should we use?
Yeah, that tension is a big question mark. Your rackets will have suggested tensions listed in their specs. So your racket might say the tension is 50 to 59 pounds. And tension is measured by pounds. And anywhere in that range is sort of what the manufacturer recommends. That doesn't mean you have to stay in that range. When you think about how tight you want to make it, the tighter you go, you'll get generally more control and less power. So the tighter racket will allow you maybe to take bigger swings without the risk of the ball flying long, and maybe you put more spin on it. But if you don't take those big swings, you're maybe losing some power. You're maybe taking some power out of your racket. So as you string it lower, you can get a little more power, sometimes a little more spin, depending on the physics of it. I think there's some debate about that in terms of how the ball sort of pockets into the string. As the strings deflect a little bit, they create a pocket and maybe put more spin on the ball. But in general, if you string it down lower, you're going to get more power, less control. If you string it tighter, you're going to get more control but less power. And I have found playing with the Poly that a slightly lower tension than in my racket's recommendation is actually more comfortable too. It's a little bit softer because Poly is a harder, more firm string. So a little bit softer feel with a lower tension has helped me. So it's not crazy low. I think for you and I, we're both playing around 48 pounds, I think, in our rackets. That we've played lately, and I've tried to go as low as something like 45. It seems a little bit low for me. I kind of get a little bit out of control, and I've tried to go higher, and I noticed that it definitely feels a lot stiffer. So tension's very important. It's a good thing to sort of play around with once you find a string that you like and are comfortable with. So that's it's a very important factor and something to think about.
Okay, that's great. And how do we know when our strings should be changed?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So we have our own stringer, like you said, and that helps make our decision because we don't have to pay someone to do it, or we don't have to drive to the shop to drop a racket off and pick it up again. So we change our strings. I think the rule of thumb I've heard is however many times you play in a week, you should change your strings that many times in a year. So if you play twice a week, you string your racket twice a year. But I think that's just a general rule of thumb. For me, I don't tend to break the strings because I'm playing polyester, but I do start feeling a little bit of a difference towards the end of maybe my, 6th or 7th match. So maybe you play 15 hours with a set of polyester strings and I start feeling a difference. With your multi-filament strings, we'll start seeing them fray after probably 10 matches maybe.
Yes.
So maybe 20 hours of playing. Mm-hmm. We'll start seeing some fraying there, and it doesn't mean they're about to break, but it's sort of, it could be imminent anytime when you see that. And so we'll usually change yours after maybe 10 matches. So in the middle of a spring season, you're playing a lot. We'll change them more often than we are, right now with less tennis going on because of the COVID situation. So I think if you're playing with multi-filament strings, you can pretty much, or natural gut, you can pretty much play with them until they break. They're not going to really decrease in their playability until they break. Even if they're frayed and starting to look a little bit rough, they will still have basically the same tension. They won't have lost a lot of tension. You won't be losing a whole lot of control or power. They pretty much hang in there. They play pretty well up until the point where they just let go. Polyester is a different story. If you're playing polyester, they will lose tension, like we said, long before they break. They will have lost, who knows, 30% of their tension. So if I strung a racket at 50 pounds, it might be below 30 by the time it breaks. And so, you have to be a little bit more vigilant with a polyester string because they won't necessarily break when they're not at their optimum anymore. But also, you don't want to go into a match with a multi-filament string that is playing fine but is about to break, because you're going to lose at least 1 point when you break a string. Most likely, when you break a string, it's nearly impossible to have any control of the ball for the rest of that point. So if you're going into a match, you might want to just maybe put some new strings in there if it's starting to get to the end of its life. But other than that, if you have a backup racket, I guess you can just pull that one out. But yeah, I think you should change your strings when they're showing a sign of wear, or you're noticing that the ball is just flying out on shots that last week were staying in. That might be the weather or just you're playing bad that day, but it could also be your strings. So it's sort of hard for us to know as amateurs. The pros have this dialed in so well. They know exactly what's going on with their strings. But for us, I think change them when they break or when you start questioning them, kind of like we talked about the rackets.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to learn how to string, there's resources out there on YouTube, and you can buy a cheap machine like we did. And after you string your own rackets 10 times, you've already saved what it's worth. So try it out yourself.
Thanks so much to Mike for discussing strings. If you guys have anything else to add, please let us know. I also really wanted to thank Erin because she has put together a Facebook page. It's called Second Serve Podcast, and you can see pictures of some of the people behind the voices. We'd love for you to check that out. And we really appreciate everyone that has listened so far because we are having a ton of fun doing this. Thank you guys so much for listening and hope to see you on the courts soon.